Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Pick Six podcast. Just another episode. Our latest episode, as of the 26th of April in 2024. Drake, what's up, brother? How you doing?
Dennis, it's good to see you, man. It's been a long week. I'm excited for the weekend. This weekend, it's the NFL draft. Lots of exciting times right now. All the teams they're undefeated, and everybody's hopeful. And it's been an interesting first round of the draft. We've got the later rounds coming up this weekend, and I'm not sure what you thought, but man, it was surprising to see what 6 quarterbacks taken in the first 12 picks. I mean, when you look overall at the draft and what's, the way the trends are, right? It's usually teams take the offensive linemen and some other skill players and things like that. And then the quarterbacks who typically have the most success are taken in the later rounds. And it seems like teams are looking for the next Patrick Mahomes. And I don't know that person is in this year's draft class or, it's interesting to see the thought process, especially the one with the Falcons, right? They sign Kirk Cousins, and then they take, a boy from your backyard up there in Washington with Penix, and had a lot of people scratching their heads. And I think it changed the mindset of the draft, because I think some other teams were wanting to potentially look at Penix and weren't thinking the Falcons would take him, and sure enough, they did. So, what are your thoughts?
I think with the Falcons taking Penix, I mean, I'm obviously a big fan of him. He's a tremendous character. He's got a strong arm. Injury concerns are there, but I think he's a solid pick, and I think they could take a chance on a guy like him having Kirk Cousins there. I do feel like Kirk Cousins is limited. While he's a great guy, his quarterback, I mean, he hasn't been able to win in the playoffs. He hasn't been able to take a team to the Super Bowl. So I think it's a nice contingency plan for Atlanta by picking up Penix. And it did change a lot of the draft. I was hoping we were going to get the edge rusher I forget, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, out of Washington, but he went right before us to Indianapolis. So we had to settle with I don't think we settled with Taylor, but I think he looks like the Seahawks. He looks like a pretty good player. But no, I think the quarterbacks are always going to be important. I think every team's going to literally throw a flyer at anybody at this point in the first round. I mean, there's been so many busts. But the thing is, it's like playing a lottery. If you get it right, you're set for at least 10 years if you pick the right guy. So you have this opportunity to then build around a salary structuring, with the rookie salary structuring with a quarterback, and then spend and put money and put people around him, talent around him. I think it's such a hit or miss thing, but it's also such a hit if you get it. If you get it right, boy, it can change the dynamic of your full. Look at Russell Wilson with the Seahawks. I mean, we didn't pick him in the first round, but just landing the right quarterback changed the direction of that team. For 10 years, we were something. We mattered. And forever we didn't, and now we don't again. So it matters to get the right quarterback. So I think that is something to talk about. Now, tying that into the hobby, because I know nobody tuned into this show to listen to us talk about our sports analysts' analyzation of the draft. Guarantee you that. I wouldn't tune in to watch me talk about that. But we do talk about cards. And how does this directly relate to the card market? I think it introduces a new crop of talent. So my thought is, are we going to learn our lesson? And just like, major franchises are throwing flyers out there on players, are collectors or investors or people just trying to prospect going to throw money at some of these quarterbacks? Now, I completely understand spending a little bit of money on a silver prism, or, at some point here, we're going to have a Topps Chrome or Topps Chrome Gold or refractor or something like that of a prospect to see, what will happen. We had a low entry point, but the shield, these flawless cards, the amount of money people are spending on some of these cards, like a Mac Jones, and there was, Darren Ravel's website, or his news site, CLLCT, was talking about that. We got a new crop of players coming in. That's a good thing, but there are people that are still spending money on bust quarterbacks. So I'm concerned. I would be concerned about that. I don't know if it really affects you and me, but I think a lot of collectors kind of look at that and go, who's spending that kind of money on these players? Like, who's able to gamble that kind of money on a Trey Lance or a Mac Jones, or, keep going down the line. That's kind of, it's hard enough buying cards right now of relevant players, Hall of Fame relevant players that can bomb, much less on a quarterback like that. I get the upside is totally there, but with some of the prices people are paying, where's the upside really?
Right. Exactly. That's so true. But what it tells me, I think, with all the offensive players, and especially, you see quarterbacks drive pricing, it tells me that wax pricing is probably going to be really, really high come this fall and spring. It'll be interesting how things fall in the release calendar and that sort of thing. But gosh, it just, with all the offensive players, what was there? One defensive player maybe drafted in the first 15 rounds. And we know that offensive players, the skill players, typically drive pricing in the hobby. And gosh, there's going to be a whole lot of prospecting going on come this fall.
So in that sense, maybe that's not a bad thing. It drives energy to the hobby. Fanatics can have some fun with it down the road. I mean, maybe we'll set the table for that. But anyway, did you have any mail days this week? Anything you want to show off?
Well, so no actual mail days this week, but I did have a card that I wanted to share that's kind of a favorite one in my collection. And, I don't know, it's a wrestling card. So I'll show it real quick. So it's the Hulk Hogan 1982 Wrestling All-Stars. And so this is the PSA 8.5, which I think is really neat, right? And so the half grades, you don't come across those very often. In fact, this is a pop one. And so you think about it, what this card is 43 years old, 42 years old. And it's the only PSA 8.5. There's 25 PSA 9s, no PSA 10s. And so it's a really cool card. The way these cards were is it came out in a magazine, and you could buy a set of the cards. And at the time in like 1982, you could get the whole set for $5. And it came in like a little cellophane wrapper, and most people just broke them up and played with them or whatever. Some people kept the sealed sets and things like that. And so there's a few folks out there that still have some sealed sets. A lot of folks are taking them and getting them signed and that whole sort of thing. But I think just the history behind the set and the folks that have really done all the legwork way before me in terms of wrestling cards, I think it's a lot of people call it that set kind of like, in the Hulk Hogan, the 52 mantle of wrestling cards. I think that may be a stretch, but it's still just, when you look at more that vintage era, pre-modern era of wrestling or whatever, I think those are, the fact that they have a story is really, really neat. And I think, just seeing some of these guys like the Hulk Hogans and the Ric Flairs and some folks like that, before they became real big names in the professional wrestling world is really neat. And so, yeah, I'm excited to have that in one of my collection. And, as I try to get a unique collection, while the card is not overly rare, the rarity comes in with the grade, right? And so I think it's just kind of neat to say, hey, this is the only one that PSA has graded an 8.5. So what about you? Any mail days?
Well, I completed a sale yesterday, but I'm having a hard time pulling it up. It is a 1998 Topps Gold Label Ken Griffey Jr. Class 3 Red Label PSA 10. It's out of 25, and it's a Pop 1 PSA 10. It's a really cool looking card. I actually used to own this card, and I bought it, and then I sold it back to the person who sold it to me, and that person who graded it, and he sold it, put it up to auction on eBay, and another Griffey guy won it, and this Griffey guy has decided to part from it. So this card is pretty cool to get back. It's a Pop 1 card, so being a Pop 1 card, it's neat. Now, the audience for this card is probably not as large, but having a PSA 10 Griffey and a card like that, it kind of goes along with the other PSA 10s that I have. So I obviously have to sell a few cards, so I'm taking a bunch of these. I had a couple completed sets of like Topps 2020 and Project 70 and a few other things. And I'm just kind of piecing a lot of stuff together that I was putting together for a set and selling it to pay for it. So, and I think this is the collector thing, right? If you don't have the ability to just, have that cash lying around, this is what you do. And yes, was I anticipating selling some of these cards at any point? No. Anytime soon? No. But this is a Pop 1 card that doesn't come up very often. I owned it before. I figured this person was going to keep it forever, and they would have, except they're moving. So it kind of came up that there's a handful of cards they're going to get rid of, and it kind of fell in. They didn't even have it listed. I just asked, is this one available? Because I know you have it. And he's like, yeah, actually it is. And so it worked out. So I'm actually really grateful for that and happy about that, because it was kind of neat to get that back. And even though I had to kind of thin down a little bit once again to get it, I think it's completely worth it, because once again, it's a card that if I don't get it, I mean, there's only 25 of them. There's a handful of them graded. I highly doubt there'll be another PSA 10. And if there is, even, there can't be that many, right? There's only 25 cards. So you feel pretty good about that. One of those kind of cards you can probably just lock away and be happy you have it. So I'm happy with that. I wish I could show it off, but I'm having some trouble sharing it. So it's a beautiful card, really cool looking card. So that's my mail day.
Awesome, man. That's great. First of all, congratulations on that. I love the Topps Gold Label card. So I have a Peyton Manning. It's actually a jersey number out of 50 from 1998 Topps Gold Label, also in a PSA 10. And just the shine on those cards is amazing. The photography is so good. When you hold them, it just feels like a premium card. And it's interesting whenever you open up, if you get the packs and you like open up the packs, it's almost like the packs have like a refractor finish and like on the inside of the packs. And I just remember growing up when I was 15 years old when these cards came out. And gosh, if you could get your hand on a pack of Topps Gold Label, it was, the best feeling in the world. And so just a beautiful card. And I see you got it pulled up there. So just an amazing card.
I figured it out there. Yeah. So you can see it's a red class 3. This card in hand is stunning. I mean, the photo doesn't do it justice. It's a scan. Obviously, scans are always tricky. They don't always capture the card like you'd want them to. But obviously, it's authentic. It's verified. All the good stuff. In hand, it's beautiful. And you can see in the back, 11 out of 25. It's just neat to have had it at one point. And literally, there's only been 3 of us that have actually owned it, held it, and it's been in our possession. So. And a great Griffey collector sold this to me. So I'm, thanks AJ for making this happen. If you're watching the show, he's just a true professional. I know I've been complaining as of late, last few episodes back on some of the folks in who this is one of the good guys. So one of the great guys to deal with. So I'm really grateful to work with him and to lock this sucker up. So yeah, good stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. Our good friend of the show, Brett McGrath, Stacking Slabs. I think he would refer to that as a boomerang card. So, congrats!
Boomerang, that's good. I love that.
Sent it off and it came back. So,
yep, there you go, a boomerang card. I like that. That's really cool.
All right, job, let's get into the topics this week. We've got quite a few topics to talk about. We did have a topic suggested from a listener. He's a routine submitter. Excuse me, of topics. So from AJM Cards 94, he said, how do you value inscription autos as compared to just a regular auto on a card? So what do you think, Dennis?
I like it. I get some personality to the card. Is it going to be a card that's going to carry value? We're kind of getting into this place now with the hobby where you buy what you know and buy what you love. And if you love inscription autos and it adds this level of uniqueness to the card, which makes it fun to collect and have on your PC, then that's great. Does it add value? It depends on who it is. I think we've seen some Kobe Bryant cards where he has a Team USA card, or he says "Go Team USA," or he has a card where he's wearing it's right after the Redeem Team happened, and he inscribed on there, Go Team USA or something like that. That I think that can grab some value potentially. If it's just a random, maybe there's sets out there, right? Where they actually inscribe them. Those could be fun. This is probably gonna segue into another question I know you had on it. One of the only ones I can actually read and formulate from your handwriting.
I should have been a doctor. I missed my call.
I know, right? Absolutely. This is scary now that you have to actually read those. This might segue into one of those questions, one of those topics, and where you talk about, are these items cards? Are they just collectibles? Remember, collectibles of memorabilia, sort of, and they kind of cross that. Do they cross over into that space? I think there's something about. And I think we both listen to the crossover, and it's a great source of content, and there's always great discussions, and you're obviously very regular commenter on there and question asker. That's the way to put it. And someone who engages a lot. I think what they talked about, you got Josh's opinion that, the fun of having a card is knowing it came from the set. Everybody has a fair opportunity to get it. Once it's done, it's done. Here's how many there are. Here's the chase. Now go get it. Nothing's going to change, and everybody has a fair opportunity. When you start manipulating that market, now the checklist changes because we're adding new. Someone has the ability to spend the money to fly Michael Jordan. It creates it's not a level playing field. I know that people can talk about loaded boxes and all the other things that aren't fair, whatever. I mean, taking all that aside, assuming everything's a level playing field for the most part, that takes away from that. So I believe if you're looking at a way to create value, inscriptions, I don't know if that's going to happen. I think if it's a way to create a more unique PC for yourself, a collection, then go for it. I think that's great. But as far as like, hey, this is a market we can create, or maybe this is something that'll drive more value for a common card, like take a common card where there's a lot of them, you get it autographed, but also with an inscription. Would it be worth more than just a normal in-person autograph on that particular common card? I don't think so.
Yeah,
because not everybody's going to want that.
Right, exactly. It's very unique, and I think just to go back to AJM Cards 94 question, I think with Peyton Manning and Drew Brees, those guys sign a ton of autographs. So autograph cards of them are almost a dime a dozen these days because they continue to sign. But I found from a valuation standpoint, if the inscription came out of a set. So for example, I think about Peyton Manning. He's in the notable nickname set, and so he's signed up Peyton Manning and then inscribed the sheriff. There's other ones where he's inscribed like Super Bowl MVP, 14-time Pro Bowl, certain things like that. I think that to me, because it adds value to the card, because it separates the autograph from the other autographs. It's not just another autograph, right? And so I found in my experience, depends on the set, not always apples to apples, but typically an inscription auto that comes out of a pack pulled inscription auto is typically about 2 to 3 times what you would pay for a normal auto, let's say out of the same set, same numbering, that whole sort of thing. So I think it adds a different level of rarity especially when people have just tons of autographs of things like that. So that's the way that I would actually value it. But again, the answer is it depends. There's a lot of variables there. But just kind of to segue too, as well as with the next topic, and you hit on it a little bit, but it's the in-person autos on cards now make the memorabilia items. So for example, let's take the Hulk Hogan card. This came in a cellophane set. There was no autograph or anything like that. But now you can go to Hulk Hogan's Beach Shop. You can go to signings and things like that, and you can pay, forget what it is now, $400, let's just say. I'm sure someone will correct us, and he will sign the card. And then people typically go put them on eBay, send them to auction and things like that. But the question is like, because the card wasn't originally produced to be signed, and then now that it's signed, does it move from a true trading card to a piece of memorabilia that looks like a trading card, I guess we'll call it. So it's an interesting thing to think about.
I agree. I agree with the latter. I think it becomes a piece of memorabilia at that point, because it's not a part of any checklist for that particular card. I think the card in its original state is what, from a sports card collecting aspect, that's what you want. I guess there could be arguments that can be made. I mean, will a card like a Michael Jordan 86 Fleer, if he doesn't sign a lot of them, will that create a bigger demand? Yeah, probably, right? And unfortunately, it will. It's too bad for the folks that felt like they had the only ones, right? But I think that's unfortunate. But for just any random card, I mean, that's a big Hulk Hogan card, right? So I wouldn't want to have him sign that card, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like there's card. So if it's a common card, like I said before, if it's a common card, there's so many of them, you're probably not doing any damage. Like an 87 Topps baseball card. You want to get Bo Jackson to sign one of those 87 Topps? There's so many of them. I think I bought and sold that card like 6 times. Like I can always go get it. I can get one signed. I can go buy one. I can go to a signing. I mean, it's just simple and easy. Yeah, while they're alive. But these people are signing so much that there's going to be so many out there. I think that's happened with Kobe Bryant. He has so many autographs out there. And everybody's like, well, he's gone now, but there's so many autographs. I mean, there's more than there is demand for the most part. So if you're going to get something signed, it becomes more of a memorabilia item that you have just to showcase and go, hey, I have this. I don't know if it becomes a collectible, so to speak, as the way we look at them. Like from the mindset I used to buy that Ken Griffey Jr. card, PSA 10 Pop 1 out of 25. I mean, shining that card, never, ever. I mean, if he was standing next to me, he'd be like, no, don't sign that. I mean, that's here, sign one of these 89 upper decks that are raw, right? Heck, sign the slab one of these cards for crying out loud, but don't sign that one. So it doesn't feel like it should belong in that same conversation.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and I think too what people have seen is like someone way back when decided, let's take the Hulk Hogan. And it's like, hey, this might be worth more if it's signed. And so that people started getting it signed, and then people are first to market, and there's a big bump in value and all that. But like I mentioned, Hulk Hogan's still alive. He still has lots of signings. So the supply each week, maybe that'd be too frequent, but each month is going up, 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 up. And is that demand always going to be there to sustain the price? So certainly if you want a card, like that, by all means, it's great. Just go for it. But just be careful on people who are still actively signing, and just understand that supply could increase like we saw with the Michael Jordan 1986 Fleer, and make sure you're comfortable with the price that you're paying.
Amen.
So,
yep.
So the next topic is, and this is something that I went through kind of recently, and I'll talk more about it from a consolidation standpoint, likely next week in the episode. But I went through a little bit of a consolidation to post or to acquire a card. And one of the things I do is that if I pick up a card and someone inquires about it and says, hey, Drake, I love that card. If you ever decide to move it, let me know. And so I keep a running list of people. And if I ever decide to move cards, I always go and I'll reference that list. So that way I can reach out to those folks first. And I found last weekend when I was doing that, more often than not, I would reach back out to those people and they would say, yes, I'm interested, but only at half the price that you paid for it, or only at a deal for it, or something like that. And I would go back to previous discussions to learn that person had been the underbidder on that card, and maybe the sale that we had was the last sale. And so I find it interesting when somebody wants to try to get a deal on a card when they've obviously shown that they would pay more. And I know circumstances change and markets change and things like that, but I was just wanting to discuss, like, just for an example, right? You decide to sell cards, you reach out to somebody. It's a super rare, scarce card that somebody's not going to find anyplace else at this point. That's been the only sale in the last 2 years. What's your approach to that situation? Do you just say thanks, but no thanks and move on? I mean, that's what I did. I kind of feel like it's out of courtesy. I appreciate when people do that to me. Typically, I will pay the price they're asking if it's reasonable. But I found that others, it's like they are collectors, but they want the best deal in the world. And I'm like, can you have your cake and eat it too on cards like that?
Well, this is a really interesting question, because knowing you well enough as I know you, this is a a Drake type of question. And it goes both ways, because I've heard you ask the question where you're the person trying to buy the card from somebody, but you don't want to pay the amount of money that person wants you to pay because they paid what they paid, and you'd love to get it at a premium, at a discount, because that's what the price should be given the moment in time, all of that. But now you're on the other side of that equation where you actually own the card and someone's trying to purchase it from you, and you have your price you're feeling good about. You might even come down a little bit. And I literally did this the other day with this Griffey card I just showed you. I know what this person paid, and I know what I paid originally for it. I also know what I sold it for. I sold it for a certain number, or I bought it for a certain number, and then when I sold it back to the original seller, they bought it for more because I priced it up a couple $1,000s more. And then when that particular person went to sell it on eBay to this other third party, the third person to own it, they paid $4,000 less than that. And then, but that was the new number for them. They spent this number. I gave them an extra $700 on top of what they spent. And it was still less than what I paid originally to buy it. And obviously much, much less than what I sold it for back to the original seller. So it sort of stuck around where it should be, in my opinion, but there's only 3 people owning that card. So the market was only one public sale and ultimately 3 sales, but 2 of them being private, 3 of them being private, So what is that card really worth? Well, that card's probably worth a mixture of all those prices, right? I think there hasn't been anybody else. Now, you can go back and look at the auction and see, okay, who was the second highest bid on that? Whoever won it, there was another bid below it. That might be a true price to know there's somebody else out there that was willing to pay X. So take that number, take what I paid. So I think when you talk about like valuation of a card that's rare, because I'm using that example because you're talking about a card that's rare. Because it's easy to go back and look at comps, right? With cards that are more liquid. But if we're talking about rare cards that are sought after, and there's only a handful of people that are willing to pay for it, I mean, it comes down to what you're willing to sell it for and what that person's willing to pay for it. If they're expecting a big discount, you hold all the cards and you can say, no, thank you. And there's nothing wrong with that. Case in point, yesterday when I was negotiating that, I knew I wasn't going to be able to get it for less than what that person paid. I knew that was never going to happen. So I didn't even offer that because they made it clear they want this much. They won't take less than what they paid, but they want a little bit more than what they paid. I didn't know what a little bit more meant. So I just offered just a little bit more. Thankfully, it was only like a couple $100 more, and it got the deal done. They felt good. Everybody kind of wins. I still got it for less than when I originally paid for it, and I got it back in my collection. Then they feel like they were made whole on it, right? But that doesn't always happen. But that's because I wanted that card that bad because I knew it was a pop one. Somebody else was trying to buy it within a whole collection that was being sold. And I knew if I lost it at that point, I'll never get it back because this person's an anonymous person. And a card like that, you kind of need to just get it when it comes available, right? If you want that card more bad enough. So, and I did. That person has to want that card to meet your price. Case in point. If they don't, time to move on. You shouldn't feel bad because that's your price.
Oh, yep, for sure. And just kind of, I'll say to defend myself a little bit on the first comment. So the card
you're thinking the whole time about how to defend yourself.
Yeah, no, I'm like, geez. The card in question that I want is the Peyton Manning 1998 Credentials Future out of 7, and the last sale was $57,000 in was it 2021. And when the market was on fire, and maybe 90s and credentials weren't that or whatever, but I've reached out to someone who said he would make it available, but he wanted $180,000, and I'm like, okay, so how did we get from 57 to $180,000? That's like tripling the price on a already big value when there's never been a Peyton Manning sell over $100,000 publicly, right? And so I struggle to rationalize that, and I'm like, hey, I'm a reasonable person, so let's talk about it. And it's like, nope, this is what I think it's worth. So at this point, I've had to move on. But like the example that I had was a Breeze, a Drew Brees Inscription auto, going back to our previous topic a little bit around inscriptions. And I actually won that in auction for $780 last year. And I went to offer it, and I offered it to this guy for $800. And I'm like, hey, it's going to cost me $10 to ship it. I'm not really making any money on it and stuff like that. And he goes, well, and again, I knew he was bidding against me before it. And I said, well, and his comment was, well, when I was bidding on it, I got caught up in the heat of the moment, and I really only think it's a $500 card. And I'm like, I'm sorry, it's not a $500 card. I really want you to have it. And he's thrown up over me how big of a Breeze collector he is, and he loves the card. And ever since he missed out on the card, he can't sleep, and this, that, and the other. But then he's going to come in with a lowball offer. And I'm like, thanks, but no thanks. And so, anyways, that was the situation that I was in that kind of made me come up with the topic of how to, best handle that when, someone comes across that, they would do anything for the card. And at one point they, were willing to pay just under what you ended up paying. And then they want to, try to get a steal of a deal on it. So
anytime someone has to give you some kind of a story to get you to give it to you for less, if you want the card bad enough, you pay what's being asked, obviously within reason, if you feel comfortable. I'll say this, Drake, most of the stuff that we talk about and the way you've explained all of that, you answer your own questions, really. You give yourself the proper advice to follow. This person is telling you all these things. That doesn't seem right. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't This person wants it for, I got caught in the heat of the moment. Well, we all do. Okay, that's everybody who bids on an auction. That's everybody who bids on an auction. So you just named off everyone, all of us. So that's not an excuse. You thought it obviously was worth more, and you were bidding against that person because you wanted it. And if you don't want it that bad, you stop bidding. That happens to a lot of people too. They go, well, I don't think it's worth that. Common sense kicks in and you go, no, it's not worth that. But when you want a card, if it's worth the money, you pay for it and you get it. You find a way to make it happen. So, what I'm doing is I'm driving home from the work trip and I'm like doing all the math in my head. Okay, what do I have to sell? What do I have to move? Oh, I can do that. I can do that. Then I start weighing, okay, what's more important to have long term? Because some of these cards I'm going to sell are pretty nice cards. I don't want to sell them, but I have to get this card. Are they more important than that card? Are they more? Would I rather part with that and then part with this opportunity to get this card? So when it comes to like trying to find a way to meet the price of the buyer, that's the stuff I think about, because I don't think about, oh, how am I going to be able to manipulate the buyer, the seller, to get it to me for this price? I just think about, okay, I'm pretty sure I know what this price is. Can I get there? If I can't get there, I'm just going to walk away. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I just go, all right, I can't afford this. I want to walk away.
Right. Yeah, it's always a tough situation, right? Because I want to be, as someone who likes to get cards to people I know, I don't want to try to screw a collector out of money, because I know collectors want as many cards typically as they can get for their collection. And, especially ones that are really just wanting it for their collection. They're not trying to buy to flip it and things like that. Because, with the golden rule, it's treat others the way you want to be treated. And I try to come from a perspective like that when I'm going to acquire cards. Like, hey, I want this card just because I want it, not because I am trying to make money off it, things like that. But when someone just is completely unreasonable with an offer, it's really tough, and it kind of puts a sour taste.
You're bringing up a really good point, Drake. I think a lot of times, because like you hear about my mentality on that particular, I keep going back to this purchase because it's so fresh and new, but it's actually, you keep pointing to it. I was willing to spend what this guy wanted because I wanted the card. And I know there's probably not a lot of people going to buy it either. So I'm kind of getting myself into a card that only a handful of us would probably spend that money on out there. But I didn't mind because I wanted to have it. I love I love the card. Okay. So I wanted it and I had no intention of flipping it. And when I'm selling cards, I'm never selling cards to try to make money. I mean, obviously it'd be great, but it's to raise capital to buy these other cards that keep coming available. And it's that constant shuffle. Yep. That's it. People that are purely trying to make money, I mean, I guess if you're a dealer, you're trying to look for a deal. But if you're knocking on collectors' doors trying to get these cards to go flip, who are you going to flip it to? Because chances are you're talking to a collector that's in a community that collects that particular player, that knows all these people that love the card you're going to try to sell it to anyway, especially if it's a rare and very sought-after card that's off the radar. Then you're going to be talking to all that person's friends, collector friends. So you're going to be trying to sell it to them. And if it's Drake, and I think all of you should hear this out loud and hear it out loud clearly, if it's Drake, he's going to talk to all those people, and you're not going to have any luck selling it to any of those people. Trust me. Because Drake's going to have that conversation with all those guys, and they're going to be, guys and gals are going to be like, yeah, this guy might want to sell you this card, but just know that if he tries to turn around and if he bleeds this story about how he's this great collector, he's never going to sell it, and all of a sudden you start seeing him, knock on your door going, hey, are you in this card? You're going to know he was trying to get it for a lower price so you can try to build a profit into it, a margin into it so we could sell it. Yeah, I think you got to stand firm on that. It's like, kind of goes back to that last episode, and I'll still stand and double down, triple down, quadruple down on this. So you should never guilt someone into buying something. I don't care if you said yes. If money has changed hands, you shouldn't be guilted into that. And honestly, that card that I bought is going to be part of what I'm selling to buy this card. So I'm happy to get rid of that thing. As much as I love that card, I'm happy it's going to turn into this card. So
exactly.
But yes, you should never do that. I just don't believe that's a great way to conduct yourself with another collector, with anybody for that matter. I do the same thing back to other people. There's been plenty of times where people said, I've just changed my mind. That's fine. No harm, no foul. I just move on.
Exactly.
I don't go on Instagram and do all this stuff. I just go, all right, move on.
Exactly. Nope, for sure. Well, I think we're right at about 35 minutes just now, Dennis. And I think as I'm thinking ahead, right, maybe a little tease for next week, I think we can talk about, funding a big purchase and how you look into your PC and how you consolidate, and when you decide to consolidate. Is it before or after you make the big purchase? And kind of, what strategies could we offer up people? I think that you and I may have similar but different strategies in the way that we go about it. And I think it would be fun to discuss. And I'll share a card next week that I recently had to do that for, and I'll kind of talk through what went through my head when I was bidding on the card and my strategy for consolidation and how I, moved cards and sent some cards to auction and kind of that process. So hopefully you're up for it. Hopefully everybody will tune in next week as we talk about it. And I think we should wrap it up.
Let's do that. Let's wrap it up. But before we do that, since we're announcing that's what we're going to talk about, that's a great topic. And we kind of talked about a little bit of it today and kind of prequeled it. But in the comments below, why don't you share with us, and we'll include into the episode next week, some of your feedback as to how you go about consolidating to buy another card. Now, obviously, if you're going to comment and say, I have all the money in the world, I never consolidate, I never sell a card ever, well, that's great. Good for you. That's awesome that you can do that. Happy for you. But for the folks that can't do that, like most of us, how do you go about doing it? Let us know in the comments below how you go about consolidating into a big purchase. What's your strategy? When do you feel like it's a stretch? When do you feel like where's that line where it starts to feel like you're stretching too much? You're pushing too much. You have to let go of too much to get the card. Where's that line where you draw in the sand like, I shouldn't have to do that, right? I think a lot of us kind of bump up against that sometimes when there's a really cool card. When it's just a no-brainer card, you just find a way to make it happen. But when it's like that in-between card where you really want it, but you're not willing to give up something really valuable for it because you're going to have to raise the capital to get it, comment below. Tell us what you think. How do you go about that? Because I'd be fascinating for Drake and I to see how you're all thinking when it comes to that. And then we'll talk about it on next week's show. All right.
Absolutely. Sounds great.
Yeah, that was really good. Yeah, we didn't. I don't think Drake went anywhere this week, so we didn't have to talk about that. You stayed home. I was on a trip in Boise for work, so I was in Boise, Idaho for the whole week, but just got back. And thanks for tuning in once again. We'll have this show uploaded onto Spotify, and it's going to be living on Dustin's channel, the Sports Card Dad. You get every day a show from Dustin. Every weekend you get a show from Drake and I. And we're really excited and happy to be part of the family here on the Sports Card Dad channel. And this is another episode of the Pick Six podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you all next week.